Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Travis Wilson, General Manager at WisSports.net, and we're doing a little bit of a special feature today. We've got a video call, as you can see, where we're going to talk about the recently completed NFL draft with some high school coaches who had players drafted this weekend. A very cool experience, obviously, for them and their players and their programs, and also a great time for high school football in the state of Wisconsin with 6 players drafted this year, which actually is tied for the most that we've had drafted out of the state in at least 2 decades, maybe going back even farther. Had a couple other players that were have signed as undrafted free agents or going to have shots in camps. And so it's a great time for some of these guys, a very exciting time. Before we get too far, though, let's make sure we go around and introduce everybody. And we'll start with Coach Mark Lusic, the head coach at Amherst. His player, Tyler Biadasz, drafted in the 4th round. Coach, appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We also have with us today Rob Green, the head coach at Brown Deer. Coach, how are you doing down there?
Very good, thank you.
And finally, Coach LaBuda, the head coach at Menomonie High School. Joe LaBuda, longtime coach there. Coach, exciting time this weekend, and definitely appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us and chat a little bit about this experience.
Thanks for having us.
Well, let's go back first of all and talk about the guys in high school. And Coach Lusic, let's start with you. Tyler Biadasz, a guy that was a part of several state championships for you, a multi-year starter. Tell us about what Tyler was like in high school and, kind of where you saw his path over the years.
Well, he's a great player. He's got great talent. Like all the players here. To make it to the NFL, you got to have great talent. Even to make it to Division I, you got to have great talent. Not much has changed from Tyler from when he first walked in to when he's right now. He's still kind of the same person. I always say he's a better person than he is a football player. Tremendous leader. He's one of the best leaders I've ever had in all my years here. His work ethic is second to none, and you got to have that to get to this point in your career. It's just exciting to have him have an opportunity to live out his dream. He's always wanted to do this, and to be drafted by a great organization like the Dallas Cowboys is exciting.
Coach Green, Zack Baun was the quarterback for you in high school, of course, and transitioned eventually to a linebacker for the Badgers, and that's where he'll play at the next level. As you look back at him in high school, what are your thoughts? What do you remember? What sticks out about him at the high school level?
Well, I was fortunate to have him for 2 years. He moved into our district as a junior, and one of the first things we noticed about him was just how explosive an athlete he was. He was so quick off the ball, and his ability to jump and get up and down very quickly, and his speed was second to none. And then you throw in, and you start to pay attention to him as you got to know him. His work ethic, like probably all the athletes, that got drafted, was second to none. His ability to work hard and hit that weight room, on a regular basis, really stood out. Great leader, very competitive young man, not only on the field but also in the classroom, which I thought was critically important to him to get to that Division I level. He was a good student.
Coach LaBuda, Nate Stanley, your quarterback several years ago, had a great career at Iowa. I believe ended up second in career passing yards and touchdowns for the Hawkeyes, had some big games along the way, drafted in the 7th round. As you look back at Nate's high school career, what sticks out to you?
The biggest thing I think that sticks out is just tremendous multi-sport athlete. He's our school's all-time leading scorer in basketball, and and he's also was a great pitcher, and obviously a great quarterback. He started he was our punter as a freshman in high school, but he started on the basketball team as a freshman, started as a baseball. We use our ace and pitcher as a freshman, and so that doesn't happen very often, obviously. But I think it sends a message to kids too. You get so many kids today wanting to specialize. Oh, I want to specialize in basketball or baseball or whatever, and he was a multi-sport athlete, could have been a Division I athlete in any one of the 3 sports. He had offers in all 3 sports, and, great leader, obviously, and he's captain all 3 sports in high school. And, he was a 3-year captain at Iowa, which is unheard of in the Big Ten that you're a 3-year captain. But, and like the other guys had mentioned, just hasn't changed at all. Super humble guy, just same person he was in high school, super ethical, very good student. He had a amazing Wonderlic score. Only 16 players in the history of the NFL draft ever scored higher than he did on the Wonderlic intelligence test. So just a great person, tremendous leader, just like everybody else here, saying they don't get to this level without being it, just like the other guys here.
Great to hear that mention of multi-sport athletes. Of course, Zack Baun, part of 2 state championship teams for the Brown Deer boys basketball team. Coach, did he advance to state in track as well, if I remember correctly?
He was a two-year state track qualifier. He holds our high jump record at 6 feet 8 inches. And he also ran the 200-meter dash at 21:58 at 216 pounds. Outstanding, athlete.
Yep. His block in the state tournament, I can't remember which year it was or even who it was against right offhand. He had a play where he came from behind about 20 feet from a guy, blocked it off the backboard, was one of the more impressive plays I've seen. And speaking of the state tournament, of course, Amherst made it to state in basketball. While Tyler was a player there, he was a great multi-sport athlete as well. And again, love to see that and love to see the commitment from those kids. Coach Lusic, Tyler was a kid that moved around a little bit for you guys. He played outside linebacker when he was younger, defensive end, on the offensive line as well. As he was transitioning from the high school level to college, what was your thought or where did you think he would end up position-wise? And obviously it worked out very well, moving to the offensive line and ultimately at the center position.
I thought he would be on the offensive line, and I thought he would be at center, to be honest with you. When he was getting recruited, they told him we're recruiting him as a defensive end. And I told Tyler, you might want to ask that question again, because once you sign that paper, they can put you anywhere they want to put you. And the funny part is, after the spring of his senior year, myself, Garrett Groshek, a couple other coaches, and Tyler went down to spring practice. And we walked out of the tunnel, and Joe Rudolph is standing right there. And he said, "You stand right next to me from here on out." And I knew from that moment on, his defensive career was over. And we had to tell Tyler, "Hey, you're going to O-line U here. This is a great spot for you." Playing at center was a little different. We tried him at center like one day here. I think he screwed up on purpose just so we wouldn't have to play it. But when he got an opportunity at Wisconsin, he took it, ran with it, and it turned out to be one of the best centers in the country. But I thought that would be a good place for him to end up, would be at the interior line in Wisconsin.
Coach Green, it's kind of similar conversation with Zack Baun. I think it was understood that he was not going to be a quarterback at Wisconsin or necessarily at the Big Ten level. But where did you see with the athletic ability, the size, what did you see as his fit potentially at the next level when he was still with you?
I think, one of the other traits that he had was his coachability and his willingness to do whatever was important for that team to be successful. And when we asked him to move the quarterback from wide receiver, he moved pretty graciously and didn't even hesitate. When Wisconsin, underneath Coach Anderson was recruiting him, they were recruiting him as an athlete. And I think Coach Anderson had some ideals that he might put him on the offensive side of the ball. They had asked him up front, did he still want to play quarterback? And he said, "No, I'll play wherever you want me to play, as long as I can help this team be successful." Once Coach Chris came back, I think it was pretty apparent that they had ideas that he was going to the defensive side. And then through conversations with Coach Chris and then eventually Coach Aranda grabbed onto him pretty quick. And he thought he was an athlete who could play in space on the field side and be able to cover multi-directional and multi-flats in the run and also drop back into pass.
Coach Green brings up some interesting conversations and names there. Coach Anderson, Coach Chris returning. Coach LaBuda, the recruiting process for Nate Stanley was one that gained a lot of attention in the state with, at the time, Coach Anderson not really showing much interest in Nate as a quarterback prospect, preferring different kinds of players at that position. And there was a lot of blowback and negative feedback from people around the state, including at the high school coach level. As you look back over that process, what are your takeaways and how, I'm sure you've been asked this question and I'll ask it and feel free not to answer it, I guess, but if Paul Christ was the coach at Wisconsin the entire time, do you think Nate Stanley would have ended up at Wisconsin?
I don't mind answering it at all. Absolutely. And Coach Chris was the first one to offer Nate when he was at Pitt, when he was right after his sophomore year. He offered him right at the completion of his sophomore year. And Brooks Bollinger had actually watched him, and they offered him right away when Brooks was still in coaching there at Pitt at that time. And even if Paul would have probably been hired 3 months earlier, I believe Nate probably would have went to the Badgers. But Iowa did a good job getting in on him quickly and offered him right after his sophomore year. He committed fairly early. Stanford, Michigan State, and in Minnesota were trying to get him to commit. And it was one of those things where he was one of those young men that if he tells you something, he's going to do it, and didn't want to go back on his word. He had committed to Iowa, and he stayed with that commitment. Had a great career there, but he had a ton of respect for Coach Chris. The one thing I really appreciated throughout the whole recruiting process, though, was once Coach Chris came back in the state, there was no negative recruiting by Iowa or Wisconsin. You could see there was a mutual respect between Coach Ferentz and Coach Chris. As Coach Chris tried to get him to change his mind, there wasn't any negative recruitment on either side. So I really respected that out of both coaches.
And of course, a lot of similarities many people have pointed out between the programs at Iowa and Wisconsin over the years. Stability, the walk-on programs, the toughness, even offensive and defensive schemes at times have been very similar. So as you said, a great fit for Nate. He had a great career there. So your guys are going through the process. They've committed to their schools. They've had great college careers. When did you guys start getting the idea, or when did they start telling you, hey, folks are telling me I might have a shot at the league? Scouts are asking about me. My college coaches are saying that I'm in that position. Coach Lusic, when did that start to become a reality for Tyler, do you think?
Legitimately, I don't know, to be honest with you. When I talk to Tyler a lot of times, I try to stay away from football. You get so many questions about that, and that's kind of it's an unwritten rule, but so many people ask him about football. So I try to stay away from it. A lot of times I ask him how life is or how school or stuff like that. Did I hear rumors? Sure, I heard rumors. Probably after his freshman year, his full starting freshman year, probably there were a few things. And then Tyler had a chance after his sophomore year, his redshirt sophomore year, to go. He decided to go back to Wisconsin. So probably after freshman year, his redshirt freshman year probably. And then sophomore year for sure. And of course this year it was everybody pretty much knew this was going to be his last year at Wisconsin to leave after his junior year. So roughly around that time. So I would say his freshman year.
Coach Green, Zack Baun had some struggles with injuries, especially early on, and kind of it wasn't a straight path for him, like so many other kids, though. But when did that idea of playing in the NFL really seem like a feasibility for you and for him?
I thought pretty early on, even coming out of high school, that he had a shot to play on Sundays, and just based on how explosive he was and his willingness to play different positions, and then also his ability just to play at that speed for 4 quarters. As a senior, he'd run a 4.5 in the first quarter, and he'd still be running a 4.5 in the fourth quarter. And as he would tire teams, you could really see that difference. And I think that translated into Wisconsin when they put him on the edge, how quick and explosive he is off that corner. And he plays at that reckless abandon for 4 quarters. And so, he was injured his redshirt sophomore year. He got rolled on a pile, helping a running back off the pile, and kind of set him back. But I think once, he hit the field his junior year and he started to establish himself and understand his role, because his learning curve, he had yet to play linebacker until truly, a little bit his redshirt freshman year, he played a little bit there. And then he started as a junior. I thought we started to see glimpses of that. And then when he broke out as a senior, I thought early on in September, he's going to get drafted pretty quick.
Coach LaBuda, Nate Stanley took over as a full-time starter his sophomore year at Iowa, ended up being a 3-year starter. As you said, a 3-year captain, put up great numbers there. How soon did that next level talk or idea start to come up with Nate?
There was a little bit of talk about it after his sophomore year, but he kind of had a breakout junior year where he threw 26 touchdowns and I think like 6 or 7 interceptions, and he threw the 5 touchdowns against Ohio State. And in retrospect, there's a lot of people that say, he probably should have came out after that year, but it's such a hard decision. Obviously I'm not by any means an authority on that or the NFL, but there was a lot of people that thought he would have probably been a 2nd round or 3rd round pick if he'd have came out. It wasn't a real quarterback deep class last year, and he wanted to graduate. He wanted to stay with his guys at Iowa. Part of it is, he had 2 first-round draft choices at tight end to throw to when he was a junior, which makes a big difference. And he decided to come back for his senior year. Did it hurt him as far as where he went in the draft? I can't say that for sure, but a lot of people think that. But I still have confidence, even though he went later than what he kind of thought he would, that he'll still do well.
So the NFL draft process, the preparations and everything that goes into it is pretty significant. Obviously this year was very different though, in terms of what they could do, where they could do it, how they could work out, even the draft itself. A lot of times big get-togethers, big parties for the guys. Some of them obviously in New York or wherever the draft is held in the green room. What was the draft process like leading up to it, and even draft day, or what did you hear communicate with the guys? Coach Green, we'll start with you.
Right after the bowl game, Zack went down to Arizona and worked out down there with a private company and kind of put himself in a position where his speed and his testing ability would be extremely strong. He worked in Arizona until the combine, and then once the combine hit, he came back to Madison and he got his pro day in before we closed down the state, and he had a good pro day and he had a good combine. And then, like all, NFL draftees say, that's the longest 5 weeks between that combine or that pro day and the day that draft starts. And, there's a lot of, as exciting as it is, I also think, there's probably some anxiety of not knowing where you're going to end up for the first time, and it's not your choice. And, but it was, it was exciting, and I think it was very exciting for Zack, and I think he enjoyed the process. He worked extremely hard to get there, and so he definitely, reaped the benefits of his hard work.
Coach Lusic, any idea, or had you talked to Tyler on kind of what he did for draft prep and ultimately what he did draft day?
The biggest thing for Tyler was he had surgery on his shoulder right after the season. So he had his shoulder scoped and part of the AC joint touched up. So he was not allowed to do the NFL Combine, which I think hurt him in the long run. He was kind of projected first, 2nd round right after the season ended. But then, injuries were a major part. He's had double hip surgery already in the shoulder now scoped, which some of the line coaches are like, that's nothing. That's normal for us. But GMs and other head coaches get nervous about that. So he basically went out to LA, worked out with a private company. Joe Panos, ex-Badger, is actually his agent. So his company's out in LA. And so basically from January to really up until the draft, he was out in LA working out, trying to rehab. Eat right was a big thing for him. It's just make sure you keep your weight where it's supposed to be. I was actually fortunate enough to be with him when he got drafted, which was very exciting. So much for social distancing, so sue me. But it was exciting to be there for those 2 days. It was a long process, Friday night, Saturday, but it all worked out. But he actually thought it'd be the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Rams probably showed the most interest in the offseason. And so every time one of those schools or teams came up, it was like, come on, this is it. And it finally happened with the fourth round with the Dallas Cowboys. So it was exciting.
Coach LaBuda, you sent me some video and pictures of Nate when he got drafted and already had the number 4 Minnesota Vikings jersey laying around, thankfully. So what was that day like? Is Nate waited and you get into the summer crowd, you're not quite sure, is it going to work out or am I going to be undrafted?
Unlike the guys at Wisconsin, I think it hurt him that his pro day was canceled. Wisconsin and several other universities got theirs in, and his pro day was canceled like 3 days before it was supposed to happen. I think that would have been a chance for him to really show his arm strength and some of the things he could do. He did really well when they had that State Farm NCAA, competition where they had the Big Ten against, the SEC, like Zack was with them with that, and he won the accuracy competition against that. And, it's hard to say, look, what did that mean? Obviously it couldn't have meant too much because, Jordan Love did not look good at all in that accuracy competition. Nate won that handily in that accuracy competition. And then, but not having that pro day, I think really hurt him. But as far as how did the day go, I think to him it was very gut wrenching. He had been told by a lot of people he'd be a 3rd or 4th round pick, somewhere between the 3rd and 5th. And, he actually, you got to see the business side of it sitting somewhere with him, being at his house because, his dad is my offensive line coach, and we're longtime friends. I had coached Nate in Little League, with my son and stuff, so I had known him since he could walk. And so we're close with their family, and it was gut-wrenching because, at several different times he had teams like 4 picks away text him and say, we're going to pick you in the next – and with the next pick, and they'd trade the pick. And that's hard for a kid to sit there. Like, he had 4 or 5 teams that happened to him. Then he actually had one call him and say, we're going to pick you at the next pick unless this defensive player is coming up. That was in the 5th round, and then they took a defensive player. And so for him, it was a gut wrench, and it was hard to watch, to be honest with you. And then he was very thankful when it finally happened. But, the rounds kept going by, and he'd get all these false hopes from different, player personnel guys. And so it was hard to watch, to be honest with you. But obviously really happy. The way it turned out, it couldn't have gone any better. You think about with all the coronavirus stuff and planning where you're going to go when he's 45 minutes from home.
Out of curiosity, Coach, when he was still there in the 7th round, had teams started calling him and saying, hey, if you don't go drafted, if you go undrafted, we want to be in touch. We want to sign you. Had those calls started to happen yet?
Right away right when the 6th round ended, the Giants didn't have another pick, and they had called and offered him a free agent contract. Said, if by chance you don't get drafted in the 7th, we'll give you a guaranteed contract to be the number 3, and gave him the numbers of what that contract would be. But fortunately, he didn't have to do that, and doesn't have to go out to New York because he's a hunting and fishing type kid. I don't think New York would have been that great for him.
So, not asking you guys to be player personnel directors or GMs for NFL teams, but just curious where you think your guys fit and how they'll fit into their new teams as you kind of look over what they can do, what maybe is on the rosters already. Coach Green, where and how do you think Zack Baun fits in with the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, New Orleans Saints. I think for sure he'll get his start on special teams. If you watched his career at Wisconsin, he played a lot of kickoff and some punt coverage, and so I'm sure he'll get the door open there. He also will become, I think, a very good pass rusher off the edge. I know in the Pro Bowl they moved him down inside to see what he could do as a middle linebacker. So I think it really comes down to, he'll move wherever they need him to move, but the Saints play an aggressive defense, so I think he will work his way into that starting lineup and have a very fruitful career as a linebacker.
Coach Lusic, much has been made of Tyler stepping into a situation with the Dallas Cowboys where he has at least the chance to replace another former Badger, Travis Frederick, who was forced to retire a little bit early due to some medical issues. What are your thoughts about the chances that Tyler has to step in there and maybe even earn a starting role pretty quickly?
I think it's a good chance. I'd be lying if I didn't believe that. They drafted him for a reason to replace Frederick. The rumor is that during the phone call with Tyler, the offensive line coach kept telling the GM and the head, Mike McCarthy, we don't have a center. We get him. He's sitting here. Let's get him. They kept looking at our players, and so it finally worked out. But I think he's got a chance to definitely compete for a starting job if he's healthy. The big thing is, he is healthy, but he's not back to full strength and his shoulder yet in his weight training. So if he can get there come, well, who knows when, July, we'll say, or August. If he can get there, I think he'll have a good chance to pick up the offense. He said the offensive scheme is not very difficult to learn. He picked it up pretty quickly when he was getting interviewed at the combine. But there's some darn good players down there in Dallas. They all off the line is they're studs for a reason. So he's gonna have to work his tail off to get an opportunity. But I think he will get an opportunity, and if he does get it, I expect great things from him.
Coach LaBuda, I don't know the Vikings roster in great detail. I thought I saw that they had 3 quarterbacks on the roster currently, and I'm guessing they had 3 last year. But where do you think Nate fits in terms of having a shot to make that roster? And what might be some of the key things for him that will, make that happen?
They didn't obviously draft him to replace Kirk Cousins. He's not going to have a chance at, beating out Kirk Cousins. But, I think his chances to try to, come in there and be the 2 or 3, the 2 guys ahead of him are undrafted players on 1-year contracts. So, but, they're there for a reason. You think about it, there's really only 64 guys that play quarterback in the NFL in one given season, the starter and the backup for most part. So, there's not anything that's given, that's for sure. But, I have a lot of confidence in him that he can get this done, and it's going to take a lot of hard work, just like anything else you do. But I have a lot of confidence in him. It's a little difficult for me to cheer for the purple. I always told kids in class when they walked in with a Vikings jersey on, I always asked them if they cheered for the Russians in the Olympics too. But but I'll have to make that transition and be a Vikings coach or Vikings fan as well.
You're up there in that area where there's probably too many of them around, aren't there?
There is a lot of Vikings fans up here, and I guess there'll be a lot more now in our town.
So biggest question of the day, who has already ordered their personalized NFL jersey?
I actually have a little in with that because I went to high school with Peter DeLeith that, so he can help me out with that. The guy that made, at Ripon Athletics. So.
Coach Green, when's that Zack Baun Saints jersey coming?
I'll have to look into that. I have not. They haven't established a number for him yet, so I don't want to have a jersey without a number on the back.
There you go. Yeah. All right, guys. This has been awesome. Great insight from all of you on your players, what their process has been like. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and hopefully we'll be getting back to some normalcy soon. We'll save that for a different conversation. But looking forward to following your guys and looking forward to watching your teams this year. Coach Lusic, Coach LaBuda, Coach Green, again, big thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.